Israel has kept up its intensified bombardment of the Gaza Strip, with dozens of the latest strikes in the south of the territory. The Israelis had told Palestinians to head to southern Gaza for their own safety before a possible ground offensive. But some Gazans have moved back to their homes in the north because of shortages of food and water and because they don't feel safer in the south. Israeli forces say they've carried out limited incursions inside the Gaza Strip in the lead-up to a possible ground offensive. An army spokesman said one soldier was killed by an anti-tank missile fired by Hamas. The raids are also aimed at gaining information on the whereabouts of the more than 200 hostages being held in Gaza. A third convoy of more than a dozen aid trucks is at the Rafah crossing from Egypt, waiting for permission to head into Gaza. The head of the main UN agency helping Palestinians in Gaza says hundreds of truckloads of aid are needed every day rather than the few dozen which have been allowed in so far. The agency has called for fuel to be allowed in, with only a minimal supply left for hospitals, water, desalination plants and bakeries. Israel says it's not permitting fuel deliveries because they could be commandeered by Hamas. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says the Israeli bombardment of Gaza has killed more than 5,000 people, including 2,000 children. Attacks by Hamas on Israel this month killed more than 1,400 people. Well, let's get more now from our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, who's in southern Israel for us. Lise.
Yes, it's day 17 of the Israel-Gaza war, and Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has made it absolutely clear that this military operation could last as long as 3 months. We're getting more details in recent days from IDF spokesperson, making it clear that in this phase of their military operations against Gaza, they are using airstrikes, intensifying airstrikes. They say they're targeting Hamas infrastructure and senior Hamas political and military leaders. They say that overnight they hit some 320 targets. But reports from inside the Gaza Strip from Palestinians say that civilian homes are being hit without warning as the death toll there continues to rise. As we've been reporting, more than 5,000 now killed in the Israeli retaliatory airstrikes. Israel says that it's also been carrying out limited night raids in search for Hamas infrastructure, as well as more details about what are now said to be 222 hostages, including Israelis and many from some 30 other nationalities. And anxiety is growing about their fate. We'll look at all of those issues in this programme. But first, this report from Weira Davis on all the latest developments. And I should warn you that you may find some of the images in his report distressing.
It's a part of Gaza where people should have felt relatively safe. The southern part of the Strip is where Israel had ordered more than 1 million Palestinians to flee, away from their targets in the north. But last night was the worst so far in the town of Khan Yunis. Israel reserving its right to pursue Hamas targets anywhere, with devastating consequences for civilians.
Nowhere is safe, really, in Gaza. And we also notice people who were in the south evacuated and walked to the south, and they're going back to the north because they have nowhere else to go, because the shelters are they're overwhelmed.
Dima lost 13 members of her immediate family, her surviving siblings traumatized.
When we moved to Khan Yunis with my family, there were 17 of us. Then we became 4. I can't understand how just the 4 of us will live and how we will return to our home in Gaza City after 17 of us used to live together.
Also stuck in the south, Stephanie and her young family from Blackpool. They moved to Gaza a year ago, now caught up in a war they didn't bargain for.
I hope for leaving, inshallah. We've experienced bombing and planes flying over us and buildings destroyed, all sorts of horrible things. It's not been a good experience.
The UN has helped to organise 2 consecutive days of around 20 trucks crossing Gaza's border with Egypt. Hopefully another today carrying basic medicines and food aid, but a lot less than the 500 daily trucks the UN says are needed. After more than a fortnight of bombing that has reduced parts of Gaza to rubble, Israel's army is ready for the next stage, the anticipated land invasion of Gaza to completely eliminate Hamas as a future threat to Israel.
We are using all the time available to us to improve our readiness and our ability to carry out the ground maneuver in the best possible way.
Israel's allies support its right to self-defense, but global leaders coming here emphasize the need for restraint, concerned about a wider regional conflict. And while Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu won't want to seem indecisive over his vow to crush Hamas, he does have other considerations. With more than 200 Israeli and international hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza, some of their relatives want the Israeli government to make a deal. America's President Biden, whose opinion matters in Israel, has also called the release of hostages his highest priority. Trapped on a tiny sliver of land between the border and the sea, the fate of the hostages and Gaza's 2.1 million residents hangs in the balance, dependent on what Israel and also what Hamas does next. Ura Davis, BBC News, Jerusalem.